Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to another Supatease video. And the Arena World Championship just concluded its first day of competitive play in the European region, and I gotta say, it was a blast. We got a lot of newcomers, a lot of new rosters that have fused together from former rosters. We saw Echo, the most dominant team in the region, year after year after year, actually take an L in the first day of the tournament, which was completely unexpected. So there was a lot of excitement. There was obviously a lot of representation on some specializations as well, and I'm curious to see if this round of PvP tuning is going to be able to address that effectively so that we can see a few more specializations into the competitive mix, because aside from that, I really think it was starting off, with a bang. And if you want to follow along with that, twitch.tv/Warcraft. We're going to be broadcasting that basically every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And I'm going to be streaming the open bracket rounds on Wednesday on my personal stream, which is linked in the description down below. But let's get started because there might be a lot of them and I haven't seen them yet. So I'm very curious to see what's going on. Death Knights, you guys are getting talked about. You guys have been not competitive for a very long time. So let's see what's going on. We're increasing the damage of Unholy through a few sources this week and adding some power back into their healing reduction PP talent. I like that. Focusing on, the power of their necrotic wounds. That's something that previously was iconic of Unholy DK. Necrotic wounds is going to be absorbing 4% of all healing up from 3. It's not being increased that much. I feel like it's a very minor change. I almost wonder if I really miss the old school necrotic strike. That was just you pounded out a couple of them and that healer was in trouble if they weren't able to monitor it or combat against it. It was a really unique mechanic that no other class had. I really actually would like to see it return. This isn't bad, obviously, but I don't think it's huge. Festering Wound is getting a 12% damage increase, which is definitely nice. Virulent Plague as well. So your dots, your spenders are all getting buffs, basically. Death Coil by 12%. So just all around damage buffs. Unfortunately, I feel like it was survivability was the main problem for you. Being able to survive against a Windwalker or a Warrior or something like that. I feel like in the open bracket, I saw Death Knights competing and they were dying through Icebound Fortitude. It felt like defense was more of an issue than offense. This is obviously great, but I'm still worried about maybe some nerfs to some of the top performing specs, damage output or something like that. It could definitely equalize it, but you're still going to have major weaknesses, I think, in the Warriors. This obviously is nice, but I think you're still going to have some weaknesses. For Druid, Heart of the Wild cast time reduction reduced to 15%, so it's a 50% reduction. I think this is fair. We're getting a lot of secondary stats. We're getting a lot of haste, so Resto Druids, Feral Druids, even Guardian Druids. The cast speed on Clone with Heart of the Wild is ludicrously fast. It's almost like corruption level in BFA. So I think that this is a fair spell to go after. And we've actually seen Resto Druid doing a lot better now that it's gotten access to its 4-piece bonus than it was previously. And a lot of players are talking about it. And we're starting to see it get picked up. Obviously, Holy Priest, I think, is still performing better than it. But I do think it's kind of ridiculous how fast the cast speed was getting. So this is something that I think is fair to kind of bring down. Feral Druids are getting a 15% reduction in their rip damage. So spread damage is going down. This is kind of more or less maybe forcing them into Ferocious Bite single target builds, which I think is going to be noticeably weaker on the overall scoreboard for Feral. So they're getting slower clones, and one of their main damage sources is getting nerfed. Now, Feral is got a huge amount of representation. So I think these are, appropriate. Bit worried about the damage. But at the same time, the advantage of Rogue and Feral is that you have way better stuns than a lot of the other melee. So if you do more damage than the other melee and you have more stuns, you're not really having an identity. You're just overpowering them and they have nowhere to compete. So I do agree with this type of direction for it. Just kind of wish that maybe they still targeted Incarn. I feel like cooldowns are still really a big problem as opposed to sustained damage. Being a problem for a lot of classes, but I definitely think it's in the right direction. It's going to likely be felt. For Resto Druid, mana regeneration has been reduced by an additional 5%. I think it's fair. We saw rounds Resto Druid just having a little bit of an extra edge just because of passive mana regen, which seems to be an issue with a lot of top performing healers. So I think that's good that they're looking at this. I think Holy Priest is in a similar boat because the other healers, when we saw them competing, had very close games in mana. They're pretty close to the same rate, having really intense games, especially in the open bracket. I noticed, and as well in the ladder. So tuning this in is nice, I think. 4-set bonus is also getting a nerf. Its chance to trigger is being reduced to 10% from 15%. So Resto Druid is getting a clone nerf, set bonus nerf, and mana nerf. So a little bit of a triple nerf. You guys went from worst healer for a while to like now people are finally discovering it. The set bonus kind of good, kind of bringing you back a peg, kind of pulling you back in a line a little bit. Definitely going to be felt on the clone front. I think faking interrupts is going to be more difficult, and this could likely have big impact. This is like, I think this is an appropriate level of reduction to rest of Druid. It shouldn't be like totally killed off. For marksmanship hunters, you guys have been just getting like RNG casino damage, so I'm curious to see what they're doing with this. We're adjusting marksmanship with the goal of reducing their maximum burst potential, increasing their consistent damage. That is a good goal, because right now, hitting for 6 million damage or then hitting for 200 damage, that threshold between the low end and the top end is way too wide. It's way too wide. It's frustrating. Like you hit the 6 mil and you win, and you're like, oh, yay, and then if you don't hit it, you're mad, and then the other person who gets hit by the 6 mil, that type of threshold has never been good, I think, for PvP, beginner or advanced level player. So trick shots is now going to hit targets for 40% of the normal damage, down from 75. Aspect of the Hydra will now fire at 30% of its original value, down from 60. Spotter's Mark increases aim shot damage by 10% in PvP, down from 20. Improved Spotter's Mark now increases the damage of Spotter's Mark by 10%, down from 20. True Shot now only increases critical strike damage by 10%. It's so funny how this always comes and pops up. Whenever they increase the critical strike damage threshold on something, ends up being really OP, and then they have to dial it back. It's happened. I see it happen every single time on patch notes. But aim shot baseline is getting buffed by 15%. So without all these modifiers stacked together, it's getting nerfed, but baseline should do more. Same thing with arcane shot. So I think that's a fair nerf for arcane. Or for marksmanship, sorry. I would have liked to see their auto attack get buffed. I feel like if a hunter is just standing still, pew-pewing, like their auto attack is like 3% of their damage. I feel like, encouraging players to stay in line of sight of their target as opposed to run away when they don't have their cooldowns and feel a little bit more rewarded would have been nice. Like, there's a lot of classes where your auto attack damage is pretty low at the moment. Marksman is definitely one of them. But I was honestly a bit surprised we didn't see any Beastmaster Hunter at all in the tournament. I was really expecting to see more of that, but obviously Marksman with the casino build was going to likely be strong. Fire Mage, they nerfed you guys by 3% in the last change. They're buffing your Fireball by 25%. Unfortunately, Frostfire Bolt is not Fireball, so I don't think this will go through unless you're playing Sunfury. And Sunfury's Phoenix's damage is getting increased by 30%. Now, this thing's like a demonic tyrant, so I think it attacks, my understanding right now is that it attacks the target you summon it on, but if it line of sights, it'll switch to a different one. So its targeting is a bit inconsistent. I like that they're focusing on the Sunfury build, because I've wanted to play it the whole expansion, man. I want to be Kel'Thas, but it hasn't worked. I think the Sunfury Phoenix at one point hit just random targets, and it wasn't good. Damage output wasn't there. But the Frostfire Bolt on Frostfire Mage just hits so hard that it's like it can't compete with Sunfury at the moment. So we don't see any Frostfire Mage nerfs. But I think this is nice that they're targeting this, but I don't think it's going to have a huge amount of change. Developers notes, Icy Veins has been more threatening than we would like, so removing more of Frost Mage's damage baseline and making a few adjustments to PvP talents with high and low representation. This is good. This direction, that's what they need to be doing, because that's what's happened is the game has shifted heavily into cooldowns and burst, and nothing happening outside of that. So I think that's a healthy change. So Icy Veins is only going to give you 15% haste down from 20. I kind of wonder if it's the duration of the spell that's the issue. It's like a 2-minute cooldown that lasts a really long time. Frigid Empowerment now increases spell damage by 1% per stack, down from 2, so you won't scale the Frostbolts up as high. Death's Chill now stacks up to a maximum of 10 times only, down from 15. And Slick Ice now increases the damage of Frostbolt by 2% and decreases the cast time by 2%, down from 4. So the spam Frostbolt scaling is going to be all getting nerfed during Icy Veins. Frost Bomb is getting a 40% buff. I don't know how hard this ability hits right now to justify being able to take it, but Frostbomb's always been really cool. I like the shatter element of it, trying to get like a Nova off before it explodes, and I've always liked the mechanic, but it just doesn't do any damage. So maybe it won't. You're just all getting a 4% damage buff across the board, so some of this is compensated. Ice Wall is only going to inherit 30% of the mage's health, down from 40. This is another adjustment I think they're going to have to make on basically all percent health based abilities, because our stats are crazy. We have so much HP, and it's just getting higher and higher and higher. So it's good that they're aware of the percent health. I think that's something they're definitely have to keep a tab on. Overpowered Barrier, which has definitely been overpowered. To me, this is basically like they gave the Feign Death talent to mages, where they just activate Barrier and they take damage. It's even more OP because it reflects the damage. So it's like you go immune to all damage for like 3 seconds, and then all the damage you took is like spell reflected. Like I've attacked into the barrier and actually done, like, I think we saw it on a deathlog where it did like 1,000,000 hit on spell reflect. The reflected damage is super underrated on how strong this is. But now it's only going to absorb 80% down from 100, which should reduce the amount of reflected damage. I don't know how it's calculated, but the reflected damage is actually, I think, super underrated when you're able to time it on like a huge hit. But I like the direction of it. Is it enough? We'll have to see. I think, unfortunately, I don't know if that's enough to get Frostbomb back into play. But I feel like they're hitting all the right stuff. It's just a matter of whether or not the numbers are going to be significant enough. Discipline Priest, we're increasing the effectiveness of some Void Weaver. So trying to do hero talent rebalancing. Honestly, with Void Weaver, if they did like the PvP talent for Shaman where they get interrupt reduction on Lightning Bolt, because that's the biggest thing, is just you just get interrupted one time, CC'd one time during Tropic Rift, and you just lose your entire hero talent tree. It just doesn't feel good when that happens. Even like a minor amount of CC immunity after you get the Rift out onto play, so you can at least get like a couple Void Blasts or something, would go a long way increasing its viability. But they're just flat out increasing its damage. So if you do manage to sneak it off, it could be really dangerous. But if you don't, it's going to be tough to get like a huge amount of value out of it. And they are buffing specifically the Rift. So like if you can ramp it up and get it really big, it might hit really hard. I don't think it will see it in competitive play because it's just too hard cast oriented. It has too many weaknesses to exploit, right? The more instant it is, the better it is at the highest level of play. Now, this could make it more fun, especially in like Battlegrounds or something, right? Like this isn't just tournament level tuning. So maybe their goal there is to try and have it be more fun in some other areas of the game. But I feel like without some type of minor CC immunity or interrupt reduction on the spells during its window, you're just not going to be able to get a lot of value out of it. Developers notes, we're reducing the strength of Oracle Holy Priest this week through nerfs to its damage and Prayer of Mending. Oracle Preventative Measures now provides a 15% damage and healing bonus to affected spells in PvP combat, down from 40. So I was reading on Twitter from Zenlin, who's like the main Holy Priest for years now, that he thinks this could affect their mana, because if Prayer of Mending is doing less healing, you'll have to press other spells, which are more expensive, so your mana is likely going to get hit in that regard. So this is maybe a nice way of like incentivizing playing the other hero talent tree, and if you don't, well then you're going to risk some mana management. But I'm really surprised that this is the only nerf. This feels like a very minor change almost relative to Resto Druid. But maybe it's bigger than I think. On as far as Prayer of Mending's like overall healing and effectiveness. So I guess we'll have to wait and see with that one. But I was honestly expecting a little bit more for Holy Priest. For Outlaw Rogue, Restless Blade's effectiveness is reduced by 20% in PvP combat. Sinister Strike damage is increased by 20% in PvP combat. And Pistol Shot damage is increased by 20% in PvP combat. So actually increasing Outlaw's damage. Now, Restless Blades is something that I'm not 100% how important that is. If it's like this is like a massive trade-off, this is targeted during a cooldown window. It just seems weird to me to see Outlaw Rogue is getting buffed. Just seeing like the number increased seems strange. This one seems strange to me more or less. But if you're an Outlaw Rogue main and this is actually huge and this is like barely compensation for that, let me know in the comments. It just seems weird to see increased for Outlaw Rogue. Enhancement Shaman. Okay, you guys are included on this one as well. We're increasing the power of some core Maelstrom spenders, which have fallen behind the rest of its damage sources. So Elemental Blast is getting a 15% increase, and Lightning Bolt is getting a 25% increase. It's interesting to me that they nerfed Stormbringer so heavily, and now it's basically just rewinding those changes. But I think that this is nice. The Stormbringer build, which is easier to play for beginners, is going to be, I would think, really good with these changes for Enhancement Shaman. And it's all range damage. So, the fact that limitations of your mobility become less of a factor if more of your damage is coming from range sources, although you need to generate the Maelstrom from mostly being in melee range. I honestly think that's nice. Still issues with like the core mechanics of the class falling behind other classes. Like it brings some of the most easy to stop stuns. It just has much more limited mobility than a lot of the other melee, and more punishing. So it feels a little bit dated as far as the mobility compared to a lot of other specs. But it's definitely better than nothing. And then Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman is getting something here. We're increasing the strength of the Storm Conduit PvP talent and some targeted buffs to totemic resto shaman. So basically Farseer took over. I think it was mostly because your ancestors scale with your mastery now. So you're Riptide and you proc these extra ancestors that also duplicate your heals, and it's just really good healing output. And you don't have the downside of people having to stand in your healing rain, right? So it's like great healing output, and you don't have to have that trade-off. So Storm Conduit is now going to reduce the cooldown of spells by 4 seconds. I think this is the talent where when you lightning bolt, you reduce cooldowns of spells. So they really want you lightning bolting as a resto shaman. It's just so risky because if you get kicked, you can't heal. Storm Conduit now reduces the duration of interrupts suffered, though, while casting Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning by 65%. So if you cast Lightning Bolt, get kicked, you're basically not kicked. Like think about like a counter shot. If it's a 2-second kick, it's literally like less than a second. So it would almost maybe be better to cast Lightning Bolt to get kicked, because then the kick gets no value. And then you get the cooldown reduction. Your teammates don't have to deal with kicks. You can reduce all your spells. Maybe there's something you can fit in there. It's interesting that they're bringing this mechanic back because they took it out of the game. In Legion, they had certain classes had interrupt durations lowered. So I think it was like Shadow Priests, Warlocks, and Shamans. So like the 3 main ones I can remember. So if you kicked them, they were kicked for a less period of time because those classes had to cast way more than other classes. So they wouldn't be punished as much for the fact that they had to cast like that. And I thought that was honestly a good change back then. They decided to get rid of it. And now it's kind of creeping its way back in kind of a little bit of a weird way with Lightning Bolt. I like encouraging the Shamans to do damage. It's just Lightning Bolts it's a very weird spell to go after. And Shaman just has such vital PvP talents that it's weird to take a talent, like lose a grounding totem to get this. Yeah, I think it's going to have a tough spot fitting in. Rain Dance now it reduces the mana cost of Healing Rain and Surging Totem by 60%, up from 45. And Rain Dance now increases the healing of Healing Rain and Surging Totem by 50%, up from 30. And Acid Rain does 30% more damage. So this is definitely the go-to in Battlegrounds now, I would think. With the mana reductions, the fact it's going to add so much extra damage. And maybe if you're spamming Lightning Bolt in the BG, you're not targeted as much. Maybe you could get real benefits out of the cooldown reduction. So again, like this isn't just only tuning around the top 1% tournament level. So maybe that's where what they're thinking for this, is that it could be a fun Battleground build, which I could see it being a lot better there with these changes than something in Arena. So I think they're targeting a lot of stuff. Seems like they've got some good moves, on the radar as far as like getting damage out of cooldowns, and putting it more into sustain. Maybe what I'd like to see, like trying to think exactly what I would have liked to have seen from this. Feels like, Rogues got pretty off scot-free, for the most part. Maybe they could have done a little bit more for Death Knight, like Frost as well, I feel like. Feels like Death Knight is just non-existent. Fire, a little bit more for Fire. I think that they've got like their fingers on the right stuff, the right idea with this. It's just I feel like the kid is just a little bit more. Just a tiny bit more, other than that. So, but I'm interested to see how it plays out. There's definitely some classes I think should be really excited. Maybe like Enhancement, Stormbringer Enhancement. And the damage on Death Knight I think is going to be pretty fun. But the survivability might be a bit rough. So what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. Are you guys going to be checking out the tournament? Because I'm telling you, the games are really good. So I'm hoping that I'll see you guys there. Other than that, thank you guys very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.